At the speed of light, your body would stop feeling like something alive. It would feel like something being corrected. The sky would not stay above you. Darkness would not stay behind you, and time would stop treating you like everyone else. Because the closer you move to light speed, the less the universe behaves like a place made for human survival. And the most unsettling part is this: you would not need to reach light speed for that to begin. You would only need to get close enough for reality to stop being gentle. Inside your body, speed would become pressure. Inside your eyes, speed would become distortion. Inside time, speed would become separation. You were built for soft physics, for walking across a surface that holds still, for air that does not strike you like a weapon, for sunlight that arrives from one direction, at one ordinary speed, in one ordinary world. But light speed belongs to a different order of reality, a harsher one, a place where distance contracts, light crowds forward, radiation hardens, and time stops flowing like a shared river. So if you ever moved that fast, really moved that fast, your body would not simply travel through the universe. It would begin falling out of agreement with it. And before anything else, before the bending light, before the strange sky, before the loneliness of relativistic time, there is one brutal fact to face. The first thing that tries to destroy you is not the speed. It is the path to the speed. Because speed is only a number. Getting there is force. And force does not care that you are fragile. Imagine yourself inside a craft designed for the impossible. The structure around you is perfect. The walls do not shake. The systems do not fail. Nothing leaks. Nothing burns. Nothing breaks. Except the body inside it. The engines begin. At first, it feels impressive. Then it feels heavy. Then it feels personal. Because acceleration does not press on the ship. It presses through you. Your chest, your spine, your eyes, your blood, your organs. Everything is suddenly forced to choose a direction. And the body does not like being argued with at that level. A few moments ago, you were a person inside a machine. Now you are a soft biological system, being pushed by a law of physics that never promised mercy. That is the real opening image. Not a beautiful streak of stars, not a graceful tunnel of light. Pressure, compression, strain. The feeling that your own circulation is being asked to perform inside the wrong universe. Even at far lower extremes, human beings begin failing under acceleration. Vision narrows. Breathing turns deliberate. Blood stops reaching the brain as easily as it should. Awareness becomes unstable. And that is with levels the universe would barely notice. Push harder, and the body starts surrendering functions one by one. Not dramatically, not poetically, just biologically. Because blood has mass, oxygen has to travel, the brain has to stay fed, the heart has to win an argument against gravity and inertia at the same time. And there comes a point where it cannot. This is one of the first deep truths of the subject. Your body is not built to go fast. It is built to remain coherent. That is more important. A human body survives not because it is strong, but because its inner timings remain synchronized. Blood arrives when it should. Signals fire when they should. Muscles respond when they should. The brain remains supplied when it should. Acceleration begins tearing at that order, not by ripping tissue apart in some cinematic instant, but by making the ordinary choreography of life harder to maintain. And the body is choreography. It is sequence. It is timing. It is controlled flow. Take that away, and you are still physically present, but less and less successfully human. This is why the idea of light speed becomes so strange. Most people imagine it as freedom, pure motion, ultimate travel. But for a body, the opening act is not freedom. It is negotiation under impossible pressure. It is the realization that nature never designed warm tissue, liquid blood, delicate nerves, and oxygen-hungry thought for relativistic motion. And even if some future technology solved the crude part, even if some impossible field protected your organs from acceleration, even if the body somehow remained mechanically intact, you would still be entering a zone of reality where human intuition stops helping you. Because your body is made of more than flesh. It is made of timing. Your heartbeat is timing. Your breathing is timing. Your vision is timing. Your thoughts depend on sequence. Your entire sense of reality depends on one event following another in a world that stays mostly trustworthy. This happens, then this, then this. That is what it feels like to live. Near light speed, that simple human confidence begins to fracture. Not metaphorically, physically. The universe stops delivering information in the calm order your mind expects. And once that happens, the body is no longer just enduring a difficult journey. It is trying to remain itself inside a set of conditions that do not honor its scale. That is the phrase to remember. Not honor its scale. Because human life works at a small, forgiving scale. A scale where the sky appears stable, where distance looks honest, where time seems shared, where a dust particle is meaningless, where darkness is mostly empty. Light speed tears through all of that. And the first illusion to die is the illusion that motion is only something you feel. Near light speed, motion becomes something you see, violently. The sky ahead does not remain wide, it tightens. The stars do not remain scattered, they gather. The darkness behind you deepens, while the space in front of you grows more crowded, more concentrated, more severe. The universe begins leaning in one direction. Not because the cosmos changed, but because your relationship to its light changed. And that shift is so extreme, it starts to feel less like travel and more like reality being folded toward a single point. Light from the direction you are moving into gets compressed. Light behind you gets stretched. Ahead, brightness rises. Energy rises. Color shifts upward. Behind, light dims, reddens, withdraws. The universe divides itself into two experiences. One harsher in front, one fading behind. And this is where speed stops feeling mechanical and starts feeling almost mythological. Because you are no longer moving through a neutral scene, you are forcing the visible universe through a filter made of velocity. And that filter does not preserve the world, it remakes it. The stars ahead do not merely look brighter, they begin looking dangerous. The dark no longer feels empty, it feels loaded. The sky no longer feels far away, it feels as if it is collapsing inward. That is one of the most unforgettable truths in this entire subject. Go fast enough, and the universe stops looking spacious. It begins looking aimed. And once the visible world begins behaving like that, the mind starts losing its old anchors. The human brain loves stable patterns, a horizon that behaves, a sky that stays where it should, perspective that remains intuitive. Near light speed, perspective begins lying to you in ways that are perfectly real. Brightness gathers where it should not. Angles stop feeling honest. Distance stops feeling visual. The world is still there, but your access to it is being reshaped by speed. You have not left reality. You have left the version of reality that flatters human senses. And this is still only the beginning, because if light reaches you differently, time is already preparing something worse. To understand that, forget formulas. Forget clocks floating in diagrams. Think about what time actually is to a living body. Time is healing. Time is digestion. Time is fatigue. Time is memory being laid down. Time is a wound closing. Time is a face aging. Time is a heartbeat finishing. and another one beginning. A body is not a fixed object. It is a rhythm being maintained. Now imagine moving so fast relative to everything outside that your rhythm and the outer world stop sharing the same pace. That is what relativity does at the human level. It does not simply slow clocks. It breaks the assumption that time belongs equally to everyone involved. Inside your craft, your pulse may feel normal. Your voice may feel normal. Your thoughts may still arrive one after another in the ordinary human way. But outside, time is not staying beside you. You are carrying your own stream of time with you. Smaller, narrower, more private. The deeper you move into relativistic speed, the more extreme that separation becomes. And this is where the subject turns from strange to quietly devastating, because it means that speed is not only motion. At the highest levels, speed becomes a form of exile from shared sequence. You are not just going somewhere, you are drifting out of sync with the world you came from. That matters more than people realize, because a human being is not built only from organs. A human being is built from belonging to a common rhythm, morning after night, conversation after silence, action after thought, growing older beside other people at roughly the same pace. Relativity disturbs that belonging, not with drama, with precision, and precision can be crueler than drama. Even if your body were protected, even if your craft were perfect, even if your cells could somehow endure the violence of acceleration and radiation, you would still face the deeper question. What happens to a human being when motion stops being motion and becomes separation from the shared now? That is part of why light speed feels so haunting. It does not just threaten the body, it threatens ordinary membership in reality. And there is still another layer, a colder one, because space is not truly empty. It only seems empty at the speeds we know. At human scale, a dust grain is nothing. A stray atom is nothing. A whisper of gas between stars is almost nothing. But near light speed, almost nothing becomes enough. Enough to strike, enough to tear, enough to heat, enough to kill. At relativistic velocity, small collisions stop being small. The energy rises with the motion. A grain of dust is no longer a speck. It becomes an event, a threat, a transfer of violence. The silent universe begins revealing that silence was never safety. It was only low speed. That shift in perspective is enormous, because most people imagine deep space as soft, cold, empty, still. But near light speed, space becomes abrasive, like moving through darkness that has sharpened itself, like crossing an ocean that looked calm only because you had never moved through it fast enough to feel its teeth. Even radiation changes character. Even background fields become more serious. Even light becomes less innocent. And your body is spectacularly unqualified for that kind of seriousness. Skin is fragile. Nerves are fragile. DNA is fragile. The brain is fragile. You survive on Earth because Earth allows fragility. Relativistic space does not. That may be the cleanest sentence in the whole story. Earth allows fragility. Relativistic space does not. So when we ask what happens to your body at the speed of light, the first honest answer is not one final dramatic event. It is a chain of betrayals. Acceleration turns motion into force. Force turns survival into a circulatory argument. Light turns vision into distortion. Time turns companionship into separation. And space itself turns from emptiness into impact waiting to happen. In other words, long before the final speed matters, your body has already entered a reality it was never designed to negotiate. And we have still not reached the strangest part. Because next, we leave the body for a moment and step fully into the eyes, into the sky ahead of you, into the collapsing field of stars, into the color shifts, the brightness surge, the front-loaded universe, and the terrifying possibility that the faster you move, the less reality looks like anything a human mind can trust. And now, we leave the body for a moment and move into the eyes, because once acceleration has done what it can, once the ship is stable, once your heartbeat has settled into whatever strange new normal it can still manage, the next betrayal comes from the sky. Not from pain, not from impact, from seeing. This is the part most people imagine incorrectly. They picture stars stretching into long, bright lines, a perfect tunnel of light, a beautiful blur. But the real thing is stranger than that, and harsher. At relativistic speed, the universe does not simply smear itself around you. It crowds forward. The sky ahead tightens. The stars do not politely remain where you remember them. They begin gathering toward the front of your motion, not because they moved, but because their light is being forced into a new geometry by your speed. This is one of the first truly alien moments. You look forward, and the universe no longer feels evenly distributed. It feels recruited, as if reality itself has been pulled toward one direction, compressed into a narrowing field, and aimed straight at you. That is what relativistic aberration does. It bends the apparent direction of incoming light. The faster you move, the more light from wider and wider angles appears to come from the front. So the visible universe starts collapsing inward, not physically, visually. But visually is enough, because the mind trusts the eyes with an authority that goes very deep, and the eyes are now reporting something impossible. The stars are not around you anymore. They are ahead of you. The universe is no longer surrounding you. It is facing you. This is where the experience becomes truly eerie, because a human being is comforted by a sky that feels open, a sky with width, a sky that allows you to believe in space as something generous. Near light speed, that generosity disappears. The forward sky begins to narrow into a kind of cosmic wound, a brightening region where more and more of reality seems to be forced into less and less space, and the darkness behind you grows heavier. The rearward universe does not just dim, it withdraws, it reddens, it cools. It starts to feel abandoned, as if everything behind you is being slowly carried away into a colder and less reachable version of existence. So now the cosmos is divided. Ahead, compression, intensity, threat. Behind, fading, distance, loss. This alone would be enough to make the experience unforgettable. But the sky is not finished changing, because direction is only one part of what light carries. The other part is color, and color is about to stop behaving. The light in front of you gets squeezed. Its wavelengths shorten. Its energy climbs. What once arrived as soft, visible starlight starts shifting upward. Blue first, then harder than blue, past the colors your eyes were built to interpret, toward ultraviolet, toward X-rays, toward something no human being was ever meant to describe as scenery. This is one of the most unsettling facts in the whole subject. If you go fast enough, the stars ahead do not just look different. They begin moving out of the human category of visible reality. Their light hardens. It becomes more energetic, more hostile, less like color, more like intrusion. And the opposite happens behind you. Light stretches, red deepens, then deepens again. Eventually it slips away from the visible world entirely. The stars behind you are still there, but their light is falling out of human reach. The rear universe becomes a graveyard of dimming signals. The front universe becomes an oncoming concentration of sharpened light. So if you are inside that ship, staring outward, you are caught between two impossible transitions. A future that becomes too bright to trust, and a past that becomes too faint to keep. That image alone is enough to carry an entire part of the video. But it gets stranger, because brightness itself becomes deceptive. A star ahead may not only look shifted in color, It may appear much more intense, much more focused, much more concentrated than your instincts say it should. And when enough stars begin doing that, the forward view stops feeling like a field of distant suns. It starts feeling like a pressure front, as if all of space has been compacted into a cone of significance. Go fast enough, and what used to be background becomes confrontation. The universe no longer waits to be observed. It arrives. This is the moment where the experience stops feeling like exploration and starts feeling like exposure. You are not gliding peacefully through a cosmic landscape. You are forcing yourself into a relationship with light so extreme that light itself starts losing its old innocence. A photon is normally nothing to fear. It touches your skin, enters your eye, helps you see. But when its energy is shifted upward by relativistic motion, light stops being merely informative. It becomes invasive. And that should change the emotional tone of the whole journey, because now even seeing becomes a hazard. The act that once connected you to the beauty of the world, vision, starts turning into a reminder that beauty was calibrated for slower beings. That is a line worth remembering. Beauty was calibrated for slower beings. At human scale, starlight is beautiful. At relativistic scale, starlight becomes evidence that the universe is not interested in staying beautiful for you. And this is still not the strangest visual effect, because as the forward sky tightens and the stars crowd inward, space itself begins to feel curved by perception. Not by gravity in this case, but by the way motion remaps what reaches your eyes. Objects ahead can appear compressed into a smaller region. The visible world becomes less intuitive. Angles stop feeling reliable. The whole scene begins to acquire a quality that is hard to describe without sounding dreamlike. It feels aimed. That is the word again. Aimed. As if the universe is no longer passively existing around you, but actively delivering itself through a narrowing aperture. And because the human brain is built to detect intention in patterns, this can feel disturbingly personal. A cone of brightness forming ahead, darkness deepening behind, reality reorganizing itself around your line of motion. The mind does not easily interpret that as neutral physics. It interprets it as significance, as warning, as if you have entered a regime where the world is no longer indifferent. That is one of the most psychologically strange aspects of the whole subject. Relativistic travel can make impersonal laws of nature feel almost directed, not because they are directed, but because human perception is not built to witness neutrality at that scale. The mind starts to read intensity as meaning, compression as threat, brightness as aggression. That means the visual experience is not only spectacular, it is destabilizing. The usual partnership between physics and intuition breaks down, and when that partnership breaks down, wonder and fear begin occupying the same space. Now imagine what happens if you keep pushing faster. The visible stars ahead continue crowding toward a smaller region. More of the sky is funneled forward. The rear universe grows dimmer. The side views begin to lose their old character. The cosmos feels less like a sphere around you, and more like a single destination swallowing perspective. This is where the popular image of light speed as a tunnel comes from. But the truth is more severe than a tunnel. A tunnel still implies symmetry. This is not symmetry. This is asymmetry becoming your whole visual world. Everything meaningful piles up in front. Everything familiar fades behind. And the center of your attention is no longer a choice. It is decided by the speed. There is something almost tragic in that, because freedom is one of the fantasies people attach to extreme speed. Total movement, total horizon, infinite travel. But the reality is that the faster you go, the narrower your visual freedom becomes. Speed does not give you more sky. It takes sky away. It concentrates possibility into a smaller and smaller cone. And what remains becomes harder and harder to survive. This is also where deep space stops looking empty in the ordinary way. Because if the forward universe is compressed, then every tiny feature in that direction begins feeling more consequential. A faint region of starlight is no longer just faint, it is incoming. A sparse field of particles is no longer just sparse, it is a potential source of transformed energy. Even the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe, begins to change meaning. At rest, it is a cold whisper filling space, a relic, a faint thermal afterglow, something so gentle you never notice it. But near light speed, even that ancient background is dragged upward in energy from the direction you are rushing into. That is a breathtaking idea. Go fast enough, and the oldest light in the universe starts joining the assault. The afterglow of creation itself ceases to be passive. The cosmos is old, cold, ancient beyond language, and yet near enough to light speed, even the oldest quiet light can be shifted toward violence. That is one of the hardest moments to forget. Not just stars, not just dust, not just gas. Even the leftover radiation of the early universe becomes part of the story. At that point, the ship no longer feels like a vessel crossing emptiness. It feels like a temporary shelter, moving into a field where everything is being upgraded into danger by motion. And this is why the part about vision matters so much. Because the eyes are often the first place where impossibility feels emotionally real. You can explain time dilation with clocks. You can explain radiation with numbers. You can explain aberration with diagrams. But none of those things land in the nervous system the same way as this image does. The stars are gathering. The sky is narrowing. Color is leaving the human range. Brightness is becoming hostile. The oldest light in the universe is turning toward you. That is when the journey stops feeling abstract. That is when it becomes a scene. And scenes are what the body remembers. Now there is another layer to this, a strange layer. Because even though the forward sky becomes brighter and more concentrated, the universe may also start feeling visually simpler in a way that is deeply wrong. Less broad, less various, less rich in the human sense. As if speed has stripped away the comfortable abundance of space and replaced it with a brutal hierarchy. Ahead matters, behind fades. Everything else becomes secondary. That should not feel like freedom. It should feel like sacrifice. You are giving up the ordinary shape of the cosmos in exchange for velocity. That is a much darker trade than people usually imagine. And it points to something deeper. Speed is not only a way of going somewhere faster, it is a way of changing what kind of reality you are allowed to perceive. Near light speed, you no longer have the same universe available to your senses. Not because the universe changed, because you changed your terms of contact with it. That is an incredibly powerful idea for the viewer. It means there is no single final answer to what space looks like. There is the human version. And then there are versions that only emerge when motion becomes extreme enough to punish the human frame. This is where the video can briefly become almost philosophical without losing force. Because what is a world? If the world you perceive depends so violently on the speed at which you move through it, what does it mean to trust your eyes? If your eyes can be made to report an entirely different architecture of reality simply by pushing your velocity high enough. That does not make perception fake. It makes perception conditional. And conditional perception is a terrifying thing to realize. Because human beings build stability out of repeated sensory trust. We think the sky is what it looks like. We think stars are where they appear. We think darkness is simply absence. We think color is an honest property of things. Relativistic motion begins undoing that innocence, one assumption at a time. The sky is not simply where it looks. Color is not simply what it seems. Darkness is not simply nothing. And space is not simply open. It is open only for creatures moving slowly enough to experience it that way. That might be the core sentence of this entire part. Space is open only for creatures moving slowly enough to experience it that way. Near light speed, space stops presenting itself as open. It presents itself as concentrated, filtered, biased toward the front. And all of that is happening before we even return to the deeper issue of what those shifted photons and incoming particles do to matter. Because the visual strangeness is only the elegant surface. Underneath it, there is a harder truth. The universe is not just becoming weird to look at, it is becoming physically harder to pass through. The brightening forward cone is not only a cinematic image, it is a warning that energy is accumulating in your direction of travel, that light is arriving more fiercely, that particles are becoming less trivial, that the line between image and threat is fading. And so the eyes are giving you a preview of what the rest of the ship will soon have to confront. This is why Part 2 matters so much in the structure. Part 1 told you the body begins to fail before light speed is reached. Part 2 shows you the universe itself beginning to rearrange around your motion. But this is not yet the worst layer, because the next layer is where strange optics become lethal physics, where dust stops being scenery and becomes impact, where radiation stops being an invisible detail and becomes a constant enemy, where the front of the ship is no longer just pointed into brightness, but into an environment that speed is actively weaponizing. That is where the journey crosses a line between seeing the universe differently and learning that the universe has begun to hit back. So hold on to the image we have built here. A narrowing sky, stars dragged forward, light hardening, the rear universe fading into red and then beyond red. The oldest radiation in existence starting to rise in energy ahead of you. A cosmos that no longer feels evenly spread, but concentrated into a single, merciless direction. Because in the next part, that direction stops being beautiful first and starts becoming deadly. The visual funnel becomes an impact corridor, the bright cone becomes a warning cone, and the dream of moving near light speed becomes something colder than wonder. A lesson in how quickly the universe can turn from silent to aimed, and that is where the journey changes again. Because up to this point, the universe has been warning you. Through pressure, through distortion, through the collapse of the sky. Now it stops warning you and starts making contact. This is the part people almost never imagine clearly enough. They imagine light speed as elegance, as freedom, as distance finally giving up. But the deeper truth is harsher than that. The faster you move, the less forgiving space becomes. Because space is not empty in the way human intuition needs it to be. It is thin, it is sparse, it is almost nothing. But near the speed of light, almost nothing is enough. Enough to strike, enough to heat, enough to tear, enough to kill. That is the first law of this part. At this speed, emptiness stops being empty. At ordinary human scale, a dust grain is nothing. A drifting atom is nothing. A faint trace of gas between stars is almost nothing. But speed upgrades everything. A speck becomes a strike. A particle becomes an event. A quiet collision becomes violence. That is what relativistic motion does. It does not invent new matter. It changes the price of meeting it. And that should immediately darken the fantasy. Because it means the universe does not need monsters to destroy you. Ordinary matter is enough. Ordinary radiation is enough. The dark itself is enough, if you enter it fast enough. Now picture the front of the craft, not the cabin, not the calm interior, the front, the first surface to meet what your speed has turned the universe into. At lower speeds, a ship is a vehicle. Near relativistic speed, it becomes a shield, a wall, a sacrificial face pointed into consequences. And it will not be coasting. It will be taking impact after impact after impact. Most of them microscopic, some of them less so. All of them amplified by motion. That is the part people miss. The danger does not need to look large. It only needs to arrive while you are moving this fast. Imagine light rain touching your skin. Soft, forgettable. Now imagine that same rain while crossing into it at enormous speed. It hardens. It stings. It begins to feel like the environment has changed sides. Now push that idea far beyond anything the body has ever known. That is the direction of relativistic travel. Not a little worse. A different category. Not discomfort. Punishment. Not scenery. Impact. This is why the front of the ship becomes such a tragic object. It exists to receive the future before you do. Every particle ahead, every grain, every thin remnant of matter in the dark. The ship meets it first, and the ship has to keep winning, again and again, without pause, without relief, without room for a mistake that stays small. Because near light speed, small things do not stay small. A weakness does not stay a weakness. A crack does not stay a crack. A thermal problem does not stay local. At this speed, consequences spread. That is another law of this part. Speed upgrades everything, and consequence spreads. Now bring radiation back into the story. In the last part, light became visually strange. The sky tightened. The stars crowded forward. Brightness gathered in front of you. That was beautiful in a terrible way. But now we ask the colder question. What does that brightness do? What does hardened light do to material? What does it do to systems? What does it do to flesh? Because radiation does not need drama to become deadly. It does not need sound. It does not need flame. It only needs energy and enough access to delicate structure. Cells are delicate. DNA is delicate. Neural tissue is delicate. The eye is delicate. The brain is delicate. Life survives by protecting fragile organization over time. Radiation threatens organization. That is why it is so unsettling. It does not merely hit, it alters. And near relativistic speed, you are not simply moving through space, you are changing what reaches you. Photons arriving from ahead become more energetic. Particles become harder to ignore. The front of the craft enters a regime where even light stops being innocent. That sentence matters. Even light stops being innocent. The visible universe is no longer just showing itself to you. It is arriving with consequences. And once enough of those consequences accumulate, the entire emotional logic of the journey changes. Speed is no longer opening the universe. Speed is weaponizing it. That may be the cleanest line in the whole part. Speed is weaponizing the universe. Not metaphorically, operationally. The same dark that looked calm when you were slow starts behaving like a field of sharpened encounters when you are fast enough. And that means the ship is not just moving, it is spending itself. Spending shielding. Spending thermal margin. Spending structural safety. Spending engineering certainty. All to keep a single soft biological life from meeting relativistic space directly. That is what the hull becomes. A machine for absorbing upgraded reality. And that machine has limits. Heat matters, fatigue matters, shield erosion matters, sensor damage matters, system stress matters, power distribution matters. Every system inside the craft depends on conditions remaining controlled. Temperature, pressure, flow, integrity, timing. But the faster you go, the harder the front of the craft is forced to argue with the universe on behalf of all those conditions. So even if the cabin feels still, the stillness is deceptive. The quiet inside is purchased by violence outside. That contrast makes the whole thing feel colder. You sit in calm light, soft air, stable pressure, and just ahead of you, physics is pounding on the boundary between survivable life and transformed matter. That is the real image of Part 3, not a heroic ship crossing stars, a fragile interior hiding behind a surface that is being asked to take too much. And the cruel part is this: there is no pulling over. no stepping outside, no pause where the machine and the body can breathe. Near light speed, you are committed. The ship keeps meeting the future, and the future is arriving hot, dense with shifted light, dense with transformed particles, dense with the consequences of your own velocity. That word matters here, consequences. Because people talk about light speed as if it were a prize, a finish line, a glorious threshold. But long before the final threshold matters, you are already inside a consequence field. Every added fraction of speed costs something. A little more shielding, a little more energy, a little more heat, a little less forgiveness. And eventually the cost stops feeling technical. It starts feeling existential. Because now the problem is no longer just whether the craft can survive. The problem is whether biological life belongs anywhere near conditions like this. This is where fear starts changing into respect. Fear still imagines escape. Respect begins when you understand the size of the rules. Near relativistic speed, the rules are immense, and they are not hostile in the human sense. They do not hate you. They do not notice you, which is worse. Because hatred at least admits your presence. These laws do not. They continue whether you are there or not. And your ship, your body, your ambition must survive inside that indifference or fail inside it. There is a terrible purity in that. Now imagine a single larger particle. Not large in any dramatic sense, just larger than the dust and sparse background the shield was quietly absorbing. At human speed, it might scratch, dent, maybe do nothing worth remembering. Here, it becomes a different kind of event. Material can flash into damage. Local structure can fail. Fragments can spread. Secondary particles can bloom outward. A small encounter stops being local. That is why the dark no longer feels passive. You are not crossing space anymore. Space is crossing into you. That is one of the hardest lines in the whole story, because it captures what this speed really does. It destroys the comfortable idea that the universe is waiting quietly for your arrival. It is not waiting. It is responding according to rules you forced into importance by moving this fast. Nothing supernatural is happening. Nothing impossible has been invented. Physics is enough. That is what makes it so severe. The universe does not need special hatred. It only needs old matter, old light, old radiation, met too quickly. That is enough to turn travel into exposure. And exposure is the real mood of Part 3, not one explosion, not one dramatic strike. Exposure, continuous, cold, precise. The feeling that laws are closing in around the journey. Now think about age. Not human age, cosmic age. Space has been collecting debris and radiation for billions of years. Tiny fragments, charged particles, ancient background light. The thin remains of countless histories scattered through the dark. At slow speed, that archive feels silent. Near light speed, it wakes up. You are no longer drifting through emptiness. You are tearing through a field of stored consequences. That makes the journey feel older, as if the universe has been quietly accumulating ways to matter, waiting for motion extreme enough to activate them. And the body has no answer for that. Muscle has no answer. Bone has no answer. Nerve has no answer. The body is not a relativistic object. It is a local one. Warm, wet, timed, fragile. The ship can shield it, delay for it, buffer for it, but the ship cannot change what the body is. That is why the emotional center of this part is not just danger, it is incompatibility. Acceleration showed the body was fragile. Light showed perception was fragile. Now the environment shows your assumptions were fragile. Space is not empty enough. Light is not innocent enough. Distance is not passive enough. Everything is more present than you wanted it to be, and presence at this speed becomes punishment. Now there is another cruelty. Protection has mass. Mass resists acceleration. Acceleration demands energy. Energy creates new burdens. So every answer becomes another problem. A thicker shield helps, but makes the craft heavier. A stronger front section survives longer, but deepens the difficulty of reaching this speed at all. More cooling helps, but adds complexity. More protection helps, but raises the cost of carrying protection. This is what makes relativistic travel feel so brutally elegant. The closer you get to solving the journey, the more the journey punishes the machinery of the solution. That is beautiful in the worst possible way. Because now the struggle is not only with the outside world, it is with the mass of your own defenses. The dream narrows, not because it disappears, because everything concentrates. Vision concentrates, danger concentrates, cost concentrates, consequence concentrates. That pattern has followed us through every part, and here it becomes almost unbearable. You are not approaching freedom. You are approaching a bottleneck of reality, a region where more and more existence is forced through smaller and harsher terms. And this is still the devastating truth. All of this is happening before you ever reach light speed. You do not need the impossible speed for the journey to become nearly impossible. You only need enough speed for the universe to stop granting discounts. That is the core sentence of Part 3. You only need enough speed for the universe to stop granting discounts. At human scale, the universe gives discounts everywhere. Dust is discounted. Radiation is discounted. Fragility is discounted by gentle surroundings. Distance is discounted by patience. Near relativistic speed, the discounts vanish. The bill arrives in full, and it arrives at the front of the ship first. So if you picture yourself there now, inside that cabin, looking toward the concentrated brightness ahead, this is what has changed. The bright cone is not only strange to see, it is dangerous to enter. The narrowing sky is not only psychological, it is a corridor of elevated consequence. The hull is not only carrying you toward another star, it is sacrificing itself, moment by moment, to keep your body separated from what your speed has turned the universe into. That is the hidden horror inside the fantasy. Not that space contains monsters, that motion can manufacture them out of ordinary things, out of dust, out of old light, out of the harmless thinness of the dark. And because this does not happen in one final cinematic instant, it feels even colder. It is not a single attack. It is a long exposure to conditions that become less compatible with life the faster you insist on entering them. Quieter than an explosion, cleaner than a collision, and in some ways more frightening, because it feels like law, not chaos, not bad luck. Law. And in the next part, that law becomes even more intimate, because Part 4 leaves the hull and the radiation for a moment, and returns to the strangest consequence of all, time, not as a diagram, not as a clever fact, but as the final way this journey separates you from the world, from other people, from shared history, from the ordinary rhythm that makes a human life feel inhabited. Part 3 has shown what the universe does to the ship. Part 4 will show what relativistic motion does to your place in reality. And that may be stranger than damage, because damage to the hull threatens survival, but damage to shared time threatens something softer, and in some ways more human, belonging. And this is where the journey becomes quiet in the most disturbing way. Because until now, the threat has felt external. Acceleration, radiation, impact, the hull taking punishment, the sky collapsing ahead of you. But now the deepest strangeness turns inward, not into your muscles, not into your blood, into your place in reality. Because near the speed of light, the final violence is not only what happens to matter, It is what happens to time. And time is more intimate than force. Force can crush you. Radiation can alter you. Impact can destroy you. But time is the medium your life is made of. A body lives in time. A memory lives in time. A relationship lives in time. A life is not just tissue surviving. A life is sequence. Morning after night. Thought after perception. One age following another. One version of yourself replacing the last. That is what time feels like from inside a human life. Not a number, a continuity. And near the speed of light, continuity begins to split. This is where relativity stops feeling clever and starts feeling lonely. Because time dilation is usually explained like a trick. One clock slows, another does not. One traveler ages less. The outside world ages more. That sounds elegant, almost beautiful. But from inside the experience, it is colder than beauty. Imagine the ship now. The acceleration phase is over. The shielding is holding. The narrowed brightness still burns ahead. The cabin is calm enough for thought. Inside the craft, you still feel ordinary. That is the first cruelty. Your breathing still feels like breathing. A minute still feels like a minute. A thought still arrives in sequence. Your hand still moves when you ask it to move. Nothing inside your own awareness tells you that time has become strange. From the inside, your life still feels continuous, still human, still yours. And yet outside, the universe is no longer keeping pace with you. That is the split. Your body remains loyal to its own rhythm, while the rest of reality begins drifting away on another one. The deeper you move into relativistic speed, the wider that separation becomes. This is why light speed feels less like travel and more like exile. Because travel usually preserves belonging. You leave one place, you arrive somewhere else, and time carries both you and the world forward together. Relativistic motion breaks that trust. You are no longer moving through shared time. You are carrying a private stream of time with you. Smaller, narrower, isolated. That may be the most important sentence in the entire ending. Near light speed, time stops feeling universal and starts feeling private. That is not how human beings are meant to live. Human beings are built for communal time, for eating together, waiting together, growing older together, watching one season become the next while the people you love are still moving through roughly the same world you are. That is what ordinary life quietly depends on. Shared delay, shared aging, shared sequence. Relativity begins taking that away, not with drama, with precision. And precision can be crueler than drama. Now imagine a message from Earth, a face, a voice, someone you knew before the journey began. In your frame, perhaps not much time has passed. Your memory of them is still warm, still near, still emotionally recent. But outside, their life has moved further than your instincts can accept. They may be older than your heart expected, changed in ways your inner life did not prepare for, or gone entirely. That is where the science becomes personal. Because now time dilation is no longer about clocks. It is about attachment losing symmetry. Your life remains synchronized with itself, but not with the people you came from. That is devastating in a very quiet way. You are still you, but the world has moved. That line belongs at the center of everything. You are still you, but the world has moved, and it keeps moving. That is another part of the cruelty. There is no alarm for when the gap becomes unbearable, no visible tear in the air, no cinematic moment where time announces that it has stopped being shared. It just keeps happening, while you breathe, while you think, while you watch the bright funnel ahead. The distance grows, not only in space, in sequence, in lived reality. And because that difference grows silently, it can feel unreal until the consequences arrive. This is what makes relativistic travel emotionally harsher than people expect. The ship can shield the body from impact for a while. Engineering can solve portions of force. Systems can delay heat. Structures can survive radiation longer than flesh can. But nothing in the craft can restore shared time once motion has separated it. There is no shield for that, no alloy, no field, no wall. Because time is not attacking the ship from outside. Time is being redefined by the motion itself. That makes it the final intimacy of the whole subject. The one thing you cannot simply engineer your way around. Now think about memory. Memory depends on sequence. It depends on a life unfolding against a world that seems to unfold with it. You remember a room because you left it. You remember a person because they continued existing somewhere in the same broad current of time you did. You remember a season because the next one came after it in a world you were still inhabiting with other people. Near light speed, memory begins carrying a stranger burden. It becomes memory of a world that is no longer aging with you. That is different. That is lonelier. Because now the past is not only past, it is misaligned. You are carrying emotional attachments to a timeline that is running away from your own. That can make the whole journey feel haunted. Not by ghosts, by offsets, by delay, by the knowledge that you and the universe are no longer paying the same temporal price for the same voyage. That sentence matters. You and the universe are no longer paying the same temporal price. That is what speed really buys. Not only distance, difference. Difference in aging, difference in sequence, difference in return. And return is where the fantasy begins to break. Because every journey contains a hidden promise that one day you can come back, maybe tired, maybe changed, maybe older, but return to the life you left in a way the heart can still recognize. Relativistic motion fractures that promise. You may return to a place, but not to a time. That is the hidden grief inside the dream. The ship can bring you home in space, while time makes sure it is no longer home in the same way. That is not decorative science fiction. That is the emotional truth inside the physics. Near light speed, distance becomes negotiable. Shared time does not. That may be the coldest line in the whole script. Distance becomes negotiable. Shared time does not. Now feel the scale of that. Every ordinary dream of movement depends on continuity surviving motion. A sailor crosses an ocean and returns to the same century. A train arrives while the station still belongs to the same day. A plane lands in the same era it left. Human travel has always assumed companionship with the world's clock. Relativistic travel breaks companionship. It replaces it with estrangement measured in precision. And the terrifying part is this. You may feel physically fine while it happens. Not bleeding, not burning, not collapsing. And yet the life you belong to is receding on a schedule your body cannot feel. That is more eerie than pain. Pain announces itself. Time separation does not. It arrives later, as consequence, as difference, as an answer waiting for you at the end of the journey. That is when relativity stops being astonishing and starts becoming sad. And yet there is something else here too, something almost sacred. Because once you realize time is not universal, the universe changes character forever. It becomes larger than old intuition allowed, stranger than ordinary perception allowed, less arranged around human comfort. There is a brutal honesty in that. The universe was never built to flatter the body. It only happened to be survivable at the scale where the body first opened its eyes. Earth gave you the gift of gentle conditions, slow speeds, warm chemistry, shared mornings, a sky that appears stable enough to trust. That is the local miracle, not the cosmic rule. Light speed begins stripping that miracle away, one assumption at a time. The body is fragile. Vision is conditional. Space is not empty enough. Light is not innocent enough. And time is not shared enough. By now the pattern is complete. Every stage of the journey has taken something ordinary and revealed that it was ordinary only because you were living in the soft province of reality. Acceleration revealed what force really is. Vision revealed what light really is. Impact revealed what emptiness really is. And now time reveals what belonging really is. Belonging is rhythmic. Belonging is temporal. Belonging is moving through change with others at roughly the same pace. Near light speed, that pace breaks. That may be the final human cost. Not just danger, not just damage. Detachment from the common flow that makes a life feel inhabited together. This is why reaching the speed of light itself almost stops mattering by the end. Because long before the unreachable final limit, the real transformation has already happened. The body has crossed out of its native scale. It has entered a region where the universe no longer offers the discounts that made human life feel stable. The ship had to become a shield. The sky had to collapse. Light had to harden. The dark had to stop being passive. Time had to become private. All of that happened before the final impossibility. Which means the truest answer is not that the speed of light would destroy you in one grand instant. It is that approaching it would slowly remove the conditions that made you recognizably human in the first place. That is a stronger ending than destruction. Because destruction is simple, transformation is harder to forget. So if we ask the question one last time, what happens to your body at the speed of light? The final answer is this. Your body is pushed beyond the softness it was designed for. Force stops being manageable. Vision stops being trustworthy. Space stops being forgiving. Light stops being harmless. And time stops being shared. You do not simply go faster. You move into a reality that becomes less and less compatible with flesh, with memory, with companionship, with ordinary human belonging. That is what makes the idea feel so immense. Not only that it is dangerous, that it reveals how local human life really is, how provincial, how gently protected, how dependent on a very narrow range of tolerable conditions. We are not fragile because we are weak. We are fragile because we are specific. That line should stay near the end. We are not fragile because we are weak. We are fragile because we are specific. Specific to this planet. Specific to these speeds, specific to this warm chemistry, specific to a world where sunrise and sunset still belong to the same shared sky. The speed of light belongs to a different order, a place where the universe stops adapting itself to us and shows us what it has always been without compromise. And maybe that is why the idea never loses its power, because hidden inside the fantasy of going that fast, there is also the fear of discovering how little of reality was ever made for us. That fear is not childish, it is accurate. The body is an earth-made answer to earth-made conditions. Relativistic space is a different question entirely, and the farther you move into it, the less your body feels like an answer, the more it feels like a memory of a slower world. So the last image of this journey is not triumph, not a ship breaking through a barrier in glory, not a hero outrunning the stars. It is quieter than that. A small human life inside a machine, carrying its own narrow stream of time, behind a shield that keeps taking the universe first, moving deeper into a brightness that no longer looks like beauty alone, while the world it came from continues aging elsewhere, without pause, without malice, without waiting. That is the real majesty of the speed of light. Not that it promises escape, that it reveals scale, the scale of force, the scale of light, the scale of consequence, and the scale of how delicately human life was tuned to a slower corner of existence. So no, your body was never meant for the speed of light. Not because the idea is too grand for imagination, but because imagination makes it look cleaner than truth. The truth is heavier, brighter, harsher, and lonelier. And perhaps that is why we keep asking about it. because hidden inside the fantasy is one of the deepest scientific revelations a human mind can have. That the universe does not become more human at its extremes. It becomes less. And to approach those extremes is to feel how extraordinary it is that life ever felt normal at all.